Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. So today is my mid-month wrap-up. I have never done a mid-month wrap-up. I've always just done wrap-ups at the end of the month, but I have been reading so many books lately that I decided to try mid-month wrap-ups and see if it helps me, because I gotta be real honest, I dread filming my wrap-up so bad because there are so many books. Like last month I had 26 books, which was really an outstanding month for me, but it's a little daunting to talk about that many books at once. So let me know if you like this format and what you think of it. So we're gonna go over the books that I've read for the first half of the month. So this was up until February 14th. I read 11 books. They were all romance books. I read 4 5 stars, 2 4 stars, 4 3 stars, and 1 2 star. So we're gonna go through those really quickly. Also, this time I'm deciding I'm gonna go through these books in the order that I read them in, not necessarily by my star rating. So I don't know. This is a new format. You guys let me know what you think about this. I just felt like it would be easier for me to keep track of how I read the books. I'm still gonna rank them at the end of the month in my end of the month wrap up. Can I have this? Thank you. Let's see if he will behave if I take his ball away. Okay, so the first book that I read in February was Still by Kennedy Ryan. This is the last book in the Grip trilogy. This was my favorite book of all 3 of them. This was my favorite book in the trilogy. It was such a beautiful ending to this love story. The Grip trilogy is about Grip and Bristol. They are an interracial couple. Grip is a rapper. Bristol she's like managing musicians. They meet in Flow because of Bristol's brother is a musician, and she flies out to visit him, and she ends up meeting Grip, who is friends with Ryson, Bristol's brother. At this point in the series, the whole series follows their love story. So it's this big, epic, beautifully grand love story that spans a long period of time, which is something that Kennedy Ryan does a lot and that I really love, because we get to see the couple really go through life and have challenges and things that might tear them apart, and watch them grow stronger because of it. This book made me just sob. I have a whole reading vlog where I had my reaction to this. I gave this 5 stars. Honestly, this is what I would consider a 5+ star or a 6 star. This is one of those books that is without a doubt probably going to be my favorite of the year. It was so beautiful, so powerful. The love that this couple had, the love that Grip had for Bristol, and how he was just so loyal to her, how he was so loving with her, and how he was always just, it didn't matter what happened to them or what happened between them, they never gave up on each other. And this is really, when I think about an epic love story, I think about this series. If you want something that is really grand and sweeping, that spans a long period of time, that follows one couple, and you get to, excuse you, sir, excuse you, can you move please, thank you, and you get to see them really experience life and some things that might tear people apart, but in this case it makes them stronger. I can't recommend this book enough. It is absolutely beautiful and just so compelling. And this book, like, I loved Flow. I loved Grip, but Still was like knocked both of those out of the park. So if you have not read the final book in this trilogy, I really want you to. Because you have to experience the end of their love story. And if you haven't picked up this trilogy, you have to do it, because Kennedy Ryan, I think this is peak Kennedy Ryan. It's emotional, it's beautiful, it's powerful, it's moving, it's just passionate. It's so good. So I loved this one. I don't think I'm gonna find one to top it, to be quite honest. I loved it so much. So once I finished that series, I wasn't quite ready to say goodbye to Kennedy Ryan and her characters, so I picked up My Soul to Keep, which is the series she wrote before, he found his ball. Which is the series she wrote before the Grip trilogy, and this actually follows Bristol's brother, Ryson, and Kai, this is his great love story. Ryson is a musician. He was a prodigy. His parents really sort of pushed him to the limits so that they could have the financial success from his musical career, and the effects of that really made Ryson struggle, and he ended up being a drug addict. So he becomes emancipated from his parents and goes on to be very successful. And along the way, he meets Kai. Now, Kai is also a musician, but she's like a triple threat. She also wants to act and be a dancer. And she's trying to break her way into the musical world. And so when she meets Ryson, even though they have this really powerful, strong, emotional connection and this powerful attraction, she doesn't want to pursue it with him anymore because she is afraid that people will think that she's using, or that her success is a result of her relationship with Ryson. She wants to make her career a success on her own. So eventually their love and their attraction for each other cannot be denied, and this is their love story. This is the first in another trilogy. I haven't finished this series yet, but I want to get back to it right away. I kind of went on a different reading binge after this. I tried to put him on a leash so he wouldn't squeak his ball. But I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really loved this. This was just a beautiful, contemporary, heartfelt romance. Kai is Southern, and I listened to the audiobook, which I thought was really good. They had different voice actors, and it was a little bit like a performance. So even when the male narrator was narrating it, when it was Kai's turn, the female narrator would take over, and it was just really good. I really loved this. I don't think this is definitely not my favorite by her, but it was still well worth the read, and I can't wait to finish this series. Okay, the next book that I read is an e-arc, and this book is released on February 23rd, and it is Waiting for a Scot Like You by Ava Leigh. I loved this book. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought this was so much fun. This is an older woman, younger man historical romance, and we have Lady Beatrice, who is a widow. She's 46 years old. She's raised her children. They're in their 20s, and she's recently been widowed, and she has led a very stifled life in her marriage to her husband, and she really is now finally having the freedom and the ability and I guess the mental capacity to go out and live a life for her own and to find pleasure along the way and find happiness along the way. So she decides she is going to go to an orgy. So as she is preparing for that and getting ready to go for that, some friends of hers determine that she needs to have this man, Duncan McCameron, who was a former officer in the army or the war. He was a major. I don't know what you'd call that. He was in the military. And Duncan is an interesting character in that he is really trying to figure out how to live his life now that it's peacetime and it's not a war that's raging, and he is kind of struggling with that. So he takes the job to protect and escort Lady Beatrice to her orgy, not initially knowing that's where she's going. They have this, again, just a powerful first initial attraction, but they also have this connection that's on a little bit of a deeper level. Like, Duncan is really, really intrigued with Lady Beatrice. She is someone that he has never met anyone else like before, even though it's not that trope of like, she's not like other girls, but he's just so intrigued with her, with how she is so willing to find happiness along the way, and she really does get to live a more free life because she is a widow, so she doesn't have to really worry about being compromised or anything like that. And this basically is their road trip along the way to the orgy, but it's also about how they're sort of falling for each other, but trying not to fall for each other. Lady Beatrice really doesn't want to ever get married again. She's not going to let herself be shackled by marriage because her previous marriage was so unhappy for her. And Duncan is such a cinnamon roll. Duncan is a peak alpha male. If you like an alpha type hero that is very soft for the heroine, he is it, let me tell you. And he wants more than anything a wife and a family. That's what he wants. That's what he wants so badly. And so when he starts to have these feelings for Beatrice and he feels like she would be interested in a physical relationship with him, he's very hesitant to start that because he knows that he has feelings that are more than just a one-night stand type of feeling for her. And I just loved this so much. This was so much fun. This was, like it had a road trip. There are a lot of romance tropes in here. Only one bed, soft for only the heroine. Like, it was just so well done. It was very, very good. It was super fun. I just loved it a whole lot. And I want everyone to read this when it comes out because I thought it was great, honestly. I feel like it really broke through some of the typical historical romance tropes that we see. It really stood out to me as something that was unique and different, and I just really loved it. So 5 stars for that one. The next book that I read was also an ARC, and it was The Heiress Hunt by Joanna Shoup. This book comes out March 9th, and this is honestly one of my most anticipated historical romances releases. One of my most anticipated historical romance releases for 2021. I was dying for this to come out, and I could not wait to read the ARC. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I was a little bit disappointed in this story. Let me tell you what this is about. So this follows Harrison and Maddie, so this is a Gilded Age historical romance. It's set in New York, late 1800s, and Maddie and Harrison grew up as childhood friends, and Harrison always had like feelings for Maddie, like he's been pining for her for years and years and years. So when Maddie finally comes out, it's her season, Harrison decides that this is his chance to make a move on her and let her know that he has feelings for her more than friendship. He overhears her refer to him as in, like, he's like a brother to me. His heart is crushed. He ends up going to Paris and living a life of debauchery over there. His family, however, ends up falling into hard financial times. While Harrison was in Paris, he made his fortune. He's a self-made man, made his fortune over there, and his family doesn't know it. He's a little bit estranged from his family too. But when he comes back to America, his family they tell him that he must save them. He must save their family from financial ruin, and in order to do that, he has to marry an heiress because they don't know that he has inherited, or that he has made his fortune in Paris. So, Harrison enlists Maddie's help to help him find an heiress because Maddie is one of the daughters of one of the most wealthy families in New York, and little does Maddie know that Harrison is actually going to try and win her hand. It's all a ruse so that she can fall in love with him and he can have her because she is who he really wants. I loved the concept of this. I felt like this was a very readable story. It was very engrossing. I was super interested in the characters and the plot, and I feel like that is typical of Joanna Shoup's books for me. They're super easy for me to get into. They're very fun to read. They're very fast-paced. She has great plotting. She has great character development. But sometimes with Joanna Shoup, I kind of don't always connect with how they end, with how the story ends. And that was what happened here. The ending here really kind of let me down. I really did not love what happened in the ending. It just seemed like the heroine was making concessions and allowances for the hero, and he never actually changed his behavior. Oh, and there were some other things that would be plot reveals, but this was a fun read. I really liked the reading experience of it, but when I finished it, I was really disappointed with how it ended, and that just kind of is what made me give it 3 stars. It's still a good book. Like, Joanna Shoup writes a good story, but it didn't give me the emotional payoff that I was wanting. So 3 out of 5 stars for that one. Okay, the next book that I read is for the Rake Appreciation Society book club that I do with my friend Jen from the Book Refuge. This month we are reading this entire series by Sarah MacLean. This is the Scandal and Scoundrel series. This is the second book in that. It is Ascot in the Dark, and I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. So this book follows Lily, who is basically, she's kind of been looked over her whole life, and she's never really had anyone who's really loved and cared for her. So Lily really is wanting someone to just love and care for her. And she ends up catching the eye of an artist who is wanting to paint her. They have this relationship, and Lily is just so enamored with him and is so taken with how kind he is to her and how much attention he pays to her. When he asks her to pose nude for a painting, she readily agrees and believes that it's not ever going to be shown and all that other stuff. Inevitably, it is shown, and there's a great big scandal created around Lily. And so to escape that, she ends up going to the Duke of Warwick, who has inherited this dukedom. He's from Scotland, and part of inheriting that is that he acquires Lily as his ward, and it is his job to try and get her married. Now, this had the most broody Scottish hero. I loved how Sarah MacLean wrote this hero. He's one of my favorite heroes. He's so broody, so angsty, just loves and adores and wants Lily so badly, but he really struggles with feeling like she deserves better. Like, he's got some things in his past that are revealed in here that he's just sure that she can do better and that she deserves better. So he does kind of fall into that trope of, oh, I'm not good enough for her. And that was really what made this a 4-star instead of a 5-star for me. I feel like everything else in this was pretty much perfect. I loved the couple. I felt like they had great chemistry. I really, really enjoyed this one. I will talk about more of the specifics of this when we have our live show for this book, which will be February 27th here on my channel, and then February 28th we're going to have Sarah McLean, an interview with her on Jen's channel. So mark your calendars for that. So overall, I really enjoyed this. I think that it just had a few things that really didn't work for me, but other than that, I thought this was honestly, Sarah McLean, she's just such a wonderful storyteller, I think, and I really love how she writes her characters and her plots, and I feel like this one was pretty unique, and it was a good read. It just had a few things that knocked it to a 4 for me. All right, the next book that I read is The Duchess War by Courtney Milan. This is only the second book of hers that I have read. I previously read The Duke Who Didn't, which I believe is her newest release, and I really loved that one. I gave that 5 out of 5 stars. But this one just didn't quite work for me. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. This book follows Minnie and Robert, and Minnie is a wallflower, and she is trying to run away from the scandal that happened to her when she was younger that was really, honestly, has caused her a lot of trauma and stress even to this day. Like, she still carries the scars and the fears of that old trauma. They keep rising up to the surface, and she can't really live a normal life and when she's confronted with situations that remind her of her past. But she really doesn't want to catch the attention of the Duke who comes into town, and she inevitably does, which is Robert, the Duke of Claremont. I really enjoyed their first meeting in this. I thought it was really cute and really clever. I felt like the writing in here was honestly pretty good. I like Courtney Milan's writing. Honestly though, this book hinges a lot, like the whole plot of this revolves around a lot of secrets, and so I feel like, honestly, I don't even really, at this point I'm like, it's hard to sum this book up into what the plot was about, but there were a few things specifically with the writing that I just didn't jive with, and part of that was that I felt like the drama in here was it was very over dramatic. It was melodramatic. I felt like it was honestly using any type of tragedy it could to push and move the story forward. I kind of have said that I felt like this was a literary fiction writer's attempt at writing romance, and I still feel like that. I just didn't love this book, honestly. I mean, there were enough good things in here. Like, I felt like the steamy scenes were perfection. I felt like Robert was a wonderful cinnamon roll hero. I liked their first meeting a lot. I felt like they had an interesting relationship, but the way the story focused so much on the tragedies and the dramas and the sadness, it just felt like it was the antithesis to a romance novel. It felt like it was anti-romance novel in that way, honestly. That's how it felt like to me. It felt like it was capitalizing on the tragedy instead of the hope that romance novels usually bring, and sometimes that works for me, to be honest. Like, I feel like you could say the same thing about one of my favorite books, The Heiress Hunt, that it is literary fiction. It's romance literary fiction. So I loved that story. I felt like the romance in there was just fabulous. Anyway, we won't talk about The Heiress Hunt, but anyways, I felt like it was sort of similar here, but it just felt really heavy-handed. It felt heavy-handed on drawing out the tragedy and drawing out the drama and really, really working it, and I just didn't love it. So it was a 3-star read for me. Again, I feel like it's pretty split if people either love this or don't like it, and I didn't hate it, but I definitely didn't love it, and I was honestly pretty disappointed with it, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I read was also an ARC, and this was Hit Me With Your Best Scott by Suzanne Enoch. This book was published on February 9th. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. So this book follows Cull McTaggart, he is a very interesting character. So this is part of the McTaggart family series. It is now Cull's turn to marry. Cull is interesting in that he is a Scottish laird type of figure, but he also has a title, like he's a duke in the English aristocracy because of his mother was English and she passed that title on to him. So in order for him to continue to get the financial support of his mother, he has to marry an English woman, and he has to marry her by this certain time. So he is on the hunt for a bride. He ends up at an opera one night, or a theater or something, and he ends up meeting Persephone, who is an actress there, performing Shakespeare. Cull is immediately taken with her looks and her performance. He just thinks she is fantastic, and they have this connection, and I really did enjoy their first initial connection. I felt like they had a lot of chemistry and a lot of sparks, But again, I felt like there were just some plot points to this that just didn't quite hit for me that well, and I struggled staying interested in their romantic relationship because it just seemed like I don't know, like, I feel like this is something that happens with Suzanne Enoch's books for me, is that the relationship aspect gets resolved pretty quickly, or it kind of gets set a little bit aside, and then it's sort of like the zaniness of the plot is what carries it forward from there. And that's what happened here, and I just didn't really love it. So the whole plot is then, Persephone is deciding that she's never going to marry. She's not going to marry Cole for sure. Cole is determined to win her over and win her hand. They also find out that there's a plot. Someone is out trying to kill Persephone, so you have that sort of side plot there too. One thing that I in particularly find difficult with Suzanne Enoch's books is that she writes her Scottish brogues phonetically. And very phonetically, like throughout the whole book. I know that other authors do that sometimes, and it's just a little bit here and there, and I really kind of like that, but this just seemed like it was so much that it was really hard for me to get sucked into the story when I was having to like pronounce it phonetically. Like I can read it with a Scottish accent in my head. I don't need it to be phonetically there for me. So yeah, I liked this one okay. I didn't love it. It ultimately left me, again, just feeling pretty unsatisfied, and a lot of the time I was kind of bored with it. Okay, the next book that I read was Hunting for a Highlander by Lindsay Sands. This is part of her Highland Bride series. This is book number 8. I did jump into this. This was my first Lindsay Sands book, but so let me tell you, so my rating for this is 2 stars. And I just really had a hard time with this one, if I'm being totally honest. So the basic plot is Lady Dwyn is in need of finding a husband. She is a plus-size heroine. She is often overlooked by other boys, by men, and she's not very confident in who she is. And then we have Geordie, who is the Highlander, and he is looking for a bride, and he's finding himself just beset with all of these brides that are coming to him so he can choose one. He's not really interested in any of them, but he does have this cute little meeting with Dwyn where she's up in a tree, and it's honestly a pretty cute first meeting, how they first met, and she really strikes his fancy. So they end up having this really fast sort of falling in love. I don't even know that I would call it falling in love. It was more just like honestly, they reminded me of just a couple of horny teenagers. Like the level of desire for each other in this one was so high, and not in a way that was like, I didn't feel like it was very romantic or it was very like sexy. It was honestly a little bit ridiculous, and that was my biggest problem with this book, is I felt like this book was honestly really silly and quite ridiculous. There were a couple of scenes, like I was talking to my friend Jen, I'm like, I can't even believe that this happened, like, and this is like for real. And I had heard that these books were very campy and very silly and very fun, and so I didn't really, like, that's not my vibe at all. Like, I really love emotional angst. I love really romantic books. I love, sexy and sensual books, and this book was not emotionally angsty at all. It wasn't really deeply romantic. It was really just, it kind of reminded me, honestly, of sort of like a 90s sitcom. That's sort of the vibe that it had, just really a little silly, over the top. Honestly, it was just really hard for me to enjoy that type of book. So I feel like if you go in thinking it's just going to be this funny, silly, completely ridiculous, like there are multiple references to her breasts and how big they are, and like it's just running joke throughout it. Like it's silly, and I feel like it's very lighthearted silly, but it just didn't work for me at all. So I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I don't know. I don't know that I want to read from her again, honestly. I just feel like her writing style is not for me. I don't know. I am tempted to try her paranormals, but this book, I just didn't really love it. So 2 out of 5 stars. It was honestly painful for me to get through, and it was just a bit ridiculous. So 2 stars. Okay, the next book that I read, I am counting because it's on Goodreads, and so I could count it, and that is Lore Olympus Season 1. Now, this is actually a webtoon. You have to read it through, I think it's the Webtoon app. Is that what it's called? Let's find it. Yeah, the Webtoon app is what you have to read this through. This is a Hades and Persephone comic, and honestly, I was introduced to this by Jesson from Jesson Reads Romance, and I literally binged the entire thing within 2 days. I was obsessed with it. I loved it. I could not get enough of this. This Hades is such a cinnamon roll, and he is so gone for Persephone. Persephone is so cute, and she is so like soft, but she's trying to figure out who she is, and it was just beautiful. I love the references to the Greek mythology. I feel like it's very true to that. I felt like this was just a really fun retelling of Hades and Persephone, and it was very sweet and very romantic. I feel like it handles some serious issues pretty delicately, and it was honestly 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. If I could buy a physical copy of this, I would. I loved it so much. The art in this is also just super beautiful, and I loved watching it evolve as the comic evolved, so this was great. I loved it. I'm counting it because it's basically just a graphic novel on an app. Okay, the next book that I read is Love Lettering by Kate Clayborn. I was very hyped to read this. I know several people who absolutely love and adore this book, and I had read one of her novellas at Christmas time that I did enjoy. I gave that one 3 out of 5 stars. I feel like I was really hyped up for this one. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. This is a contemporary romance, and this follows Meg, who is a sort of like a hand lettering phenomenon. She has really built this career for hand lettering planners and all these other things for celebrities, and her business is pretty much booming. She has this ability to also like read the signs around her and sort of interpret them into this like what might happen. So she has this couple come to her for wedding announcements, and the signs that she's getting or the vibes that she's getting from them lead her to believe that this marriage is doomed to fail. So she ends up putting that message into their wedding announcements, but so that nobody else can see it but her. So a year passes, and the groom from this couple comes to visit her. Again, his name is Reed, and he says, "How did you know that my marriage was not going to work?" Because he found her hidden message, because he's a numbers guy. He solved the puzzle and all that other stuff, and he wanted to know how, excuse me, sir, how she knew that that their marriage wasn't going to work. And she's pretty blown away by that. So they end up talking a little bit and having a little bit of a conversation. So at the time when Reed comes back into her life, she is sort of having a breakup with her roommate and who was her best friend, and it's really sort of emotionally draining her. She's also got this work deadline that she's got to make, but she is like creatively blocked. She just cannot think of any new concept for this deadline that she has approaching. So her and Reed embark on this journey to try and find her creative spark again. They end up forming a relationship, and this book, honestly, it was really well written. It was really beautifully written. I really loved the emphasis on hand lettering. Like, I thought that was really cool. I loved watching her sort of build her career and work in her career that was a hand-based business, which I don't do hand lettering, but I do have a handmade home-based business, so that was pretty cool to me. I liked that a lot. But this book, and I did like her relationship with Reed, although it was very, very slow burn. Very, very slow burn. And Reed was sort of an unlikable hero for me for a lot of this book. He just wasn't my favorite hero I've ever met. He was kind of unlikable, kind of a jerk to her, and yeah. So, but I did enjoy this book overall. I gave this one 3 stars again, but this book sort of felt like it was riding the line between women's fiction and romance a little too closely, and maybe a little bit further on the women's fiction side, which isn't a bad thing. It's just not necessarily what I love, and I just honestly, I felt like I had high expectations for this. I felt like the concept was really great, and I felt like it had the potential to really be a beautifully moving love story for me, and it just kind of fell short of that, so I ended up giving this 3 stars. Okay, and the last book that I read is Love at First. So this book is also by Kate Clayborn. This is another arc. This book comes out February 23rd. I loved this book. Now, when I finished Love Lettering, I was a little bit nervous about how I was going to feel about this, because I feel like I had read 2 of Kate Clayborn's previous things that didn't really work for me. I mean, they were fine, they were good, but they weren't like stellar, you know, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to invest more time in something that I wasn't really in love with. But Love Lettering completely surprised me, and I loved this book. I loved it so much. I gave this 5 stars. Oh, it was so perfect. This was everything that I wanted in a contemporary romance novel. It was so great. So this book follows Will and Nora. Will and Nora meet when they are like teenagers or children. Will is a little bit older than Nora. He's 15 when he first sees Nora. He goes with his mom to visit his uncle, who he has never met. He believes that he doesn't have any family other than his mom and dad. There are some problems at home with Will's mom and dad, and so his mom goes to find his uncle to try and get some help with that. Will ends up waiting outside when his mom sends him out there, and it's in this apartment complex. And that's when he first sees Nora, this feisty little girl who is throwing cherry tomatoes at some squirrels that end up hitting Will by mistake, that she's trying to get these squirrels to go away. Will is so taken with Nora at that moment, and the things that happen with his family really sort of make him reflect and change his life path, and he's only 15 when that happens. And things sort of head from there. So there's a time jump from when they're 15 and they meet years later when Will's uncle has passed away and he has left this apartment building to Will. Nora ends up living there too, and she is sort of like owning the apartment. She's running the apartment because her grandmother owned it and left it to her. Her grandmother had passed away. So Will and Nora meet up again, not knowing that they had met earlier. Will finds out sooner than Nora does, and they have a beautifully emotional, such a sweet, loving, really passionate relationship, and it was just so beautiful. I loved watching these two people really struggle with some of their past and try and merge their ideas of what love could be into how it actually will be. I feel like this talks a lot about the things that happen when you're a child and what you see your parents do and how their love may affect your relationships later on down the road. I loved that. I loved watching both of them really come into their own and be strong people and overcome that baggage and find love and happiness together. I loved how this focused on a found family aspect where everyone in this apartment building, they're all sort of older people, and they really have become this family. I loved it. I felt like it was sweet. It was precious. It was just beautiful. I loved it so much. This was just a new favorite for me. So I gave this one 5 stars. So that ended up taking a little bit longer than I thought, but I hope you enjoyed this mid-month wrap-up. I know I have talked about most of these or some of these in my vlogs. I do vlog a lot if you are new here, but I also want to keep track of the books that I read and have more of a breakdown for books that I'm reading. So if you don't watch my vlogs, you can still find out what I'm reading and what I think about that. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought about them. And be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Say bye, Cuzzy. Say bye, Cuzzy.